to has powerful magic, he must kill 70 women.
Termasih di mata ibu, ayo tuh anak ibu. Kok saya kayak gitu?
A delusional shaman, his strange ambition, and a closet full of secret. This case from Indonesia had everyone baffled and dazzled. What was thought to be a simple murder investigation led police to one of Indonesia's most sinister men, Ahmad Suraiti, who would later be dubbed as Indonesia's Black Magic Killer. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Safa and you're watching Crime Pod. Ahmad Suraiti, also known as Dukun AS, Nasib Kilwang and Datuk Meringgi, was born on January 10, 1949 in Pasar Rongkert, North Sumatra, Indonesia, to Jurgun Suraiti and his wife Sartik. His father Jurgun was a respected Dukun, that's a shaman in Indonesia's Bhasha, who practiced traditional medicine and spirituality. After Jurgun's death, Ahmad was just 7 years old and the family's financial situation deteriorated, and Ahmad's education was limited to elementary school. He developed an interest in his father's books on magic. Reading those books, Ahmad himself developed an intrigue for such practices, and thus the cycle completed. From father to his son, Jurgun had left his son. Ahmad believes that these things actually work. Reports suggest Ahmad suffered from schizophrenia, hearing voices he believed were of his father's. Ahmad had a tumultuous childhood marked by difficulties with his mother and frequent run-ins with the law, and it led to his imprisonment at 19 for robbery and violent behavior. He served 10 years and was arrested again in 1978 for theft, receiving a 2-year sentence. Upon his release in 1980, Ahmad attempted to start anew by relocating to Medan, North Sumatra's capital. This marked the beginning of his new journey toward establishing himself as a respected figure. Ahmad's new life in Medan took shape as he followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a shaman or a witch doctor. People sought his help for various ailments, and his services earned him a decent income. With his newfound financial stability, Ahmad invested in property and started a cattle breeding business. After that, he married Tumini, and in a bid for good fortune, changed his name from Nasib to Ahmad Suraiti. Tumini bore him 4 sons, but Ahmad yearned for a daughter. His desire for another child led him to contemplate a second marriage. He confided in his mother, who initially raised no objections. However, when she discovered the identity of Ahmad's intended bride, her attitude shifted. She vehemently disapproved of the match, but Ahmad's mind was already made up. Despite Islamic law prohibiting marriage to siblings of one spouse, Ahmad remained resolute. He ignored his mother's plea and married Tumini's sisters, Tumina and Natia. These unions produced 5 additional children. Now with 3 wives, Tumini, Tumina and Natia, and 9 children, Ahmad's household was sprawling. Yet he felt suffocated by restlessness and unfulfilled desires despite his expansive family. As a practicing shaman, Ahmad Suraiti's wives became his unofficial ambassadors, spreading word of his supposed mystical powers. They touted his abilities to heal, divine and protect, drawing in a steady stream of clients seeking his services. Before long, Ahmad gained immense respect and influence in Si Simeong village. His reputation as a wise and potent shaman spread far and wide, attracting people from neighboring villages. With his voice marketing and his own charisma, Ahmad's shamanic practices flourished. He became a pillar of the community, with many seeking his guidance and treatment. Driven by his obsession to emulate his father, Ahmad Suraiti devoured the books left behind, practicing the dark arts described within. The influence of these texts was so profound that he began to see visions of his father. In 1986, Ahmad had a haunting dream. His father appeared and Ahmad pleaded to become as powerful as him. His father's response was chilling. To achieve invincibility, Ahmad must collect and consume the saliva of 70 dead women. Resolute in his pursuit, Ahmad started luring women to his home, preying on those seeking spells for beauty, fortune, or control over their husbands. Under the guise of confidentiality, he instructed his patients to keep their visit secret, claiming it was essential to the ritual. With his shamanic facade and wife's endorsement, Ahmad gained the trust of his victims. Unbeknownst to them, they were stepping into a nightmare from which they would never awaken. Imagine a typical day in a rural village until a farmer's ordinary task turns into gruesome discovery. On April 24, 1997, he was grazing his cattle in a sugarcane field when he was hit with an overwhelming stench. Curiosity got better of him and he alerts the villagers. Together they start digging, unsure what they will find. After 2 hours and with the help of 6 men, they uncover the decomposed body of 21 years old Sri Kamala Devi. But here's the thing, a local rickshaw driver, Andres, recognized the victim. Andres recalled dropping Devi off at Ahmed Suraji's house just 3 days prior. What's chilling is that Devi asked him to keep the visit a secret. Andres thought nothing of it at the time, but now his memory becomes a vital clue. Police start investigating and Andres' testimony puts Surajis in the hot seat. It was a turning point in the case and the village began to realize that their respected shaman might be hiding a dark secret. Police zeroed in on Ahmed Suraji's residence and their questions pierced the air. Do you know Sri Kamala Devi? Suraji's calm demeanor faltered for a moment before he shook his head in denial. But the investigators were not convinced. They scoured every inch of his house, leaving no stone unturned. And then it happened. In a hidden corner, Devi's handbag lay waiting, its content eerily intact, jewelry and clothing, haunting reminders of the life cut short. The evidence mounted and Ahmed Suraji's facade crumbled. On April 30th, 1997, the inevitable struck and Ahmed Suraji's arrest marked the beginning of a chilling unraveling. As he sat in police custody, the silence was suffocating until he spoke. I killed her, Suraji confessed, his voice devoid of any emotion. But that was only the beginning. The true horror lay in what he revealed next. During interrogation, Ahmed Suraji revealed a chilling motive. He claimed his deceased father appeared in a dream, instructing him to become a mystic healer to gain power. To achieve this, Suraji believed he needed to collect and consume the saliva of 70 deceased young women. Deeming natural deaths too slow, Suraji devised a gruesome shortcut, murdering young women. Beginning in 1986, he systematically targeted victims, exploiting his mystic healer facade to lure and kill them. Let's talk about Suraji's first victim, who came to him trusting his shamanic power just like his other patients. Ahmed Suraji led the woman to a sugarcane field where he already dug a hole, instructing her to stand within it. The hole's depth reached her shoulders, immobilizing her. As he filled the hole, she grew anxious, inquiring about her release. Suraji's response was lethal. He strangled her with a cable, ending her life. Following the strangulation, Suraji collected and consumed the victim's saliva. He then buried her naked body, positioning her head towards his house, believing this would enhance his power. This incident marked the beginning of a gruesome series. Suraji murdered at least 42 women to satiate his desire for power. Targeting prostitutes, he exploited their vulnerabilities, assuming their disappearances would go unnoticed. Suraji's twisted beliefs, fueled by his father's supposed dream visitation, drove him to kill 70 women. He selectively chose victims, exercising caution to avoid suspicion. Women seeking advice were lured to the sugarcane field, unaware of the fatal ritual awaiting them. Suraji's modus operandi involved leading victims to a pre-dug hole, then strangling them with a cord. The bodies were buried, often with their heads facing his house. In a statement to the police, he said, "My father did not specifically advise me to kill people. He just told me to collect the saliva of 70 young women. So I was thinking that it would take a long time if I had to wait to get these numbers. I was trying to get to it as fast as possible, so I took my own initiative to kill." Ahmed Suraji's killing spree, driven by his twisted beliefs, eventually came to an end. Despite his calculated efforts, he couldn't evade detection forever. The villagers, alerted by the foul odor emanating from the sugarcane field, began to suspect something was amiss. Their curiosity led to a gruesome discovery, exposing Suraji's heinous crimes. The subsequent investigation and arrest brought an end to his murderous ambitions, stopping him short of reaching his claimed goal of 70 victims. On April 30th, 1997, Ahmed Suraji was arrested and charged with the murders of 42 young women. Forensic examinations found no evidence of sexual assault. Suraji claimed his motivations were financial gain and power. The excavation process proved challenging, with bulldozers brought in to assist. Forensic expert Alfred Sachio, I don't know its pronunciation if it's Sachio or Satio, reported that most remains were skeletal, with only 5 bodies intact. Among these was Shri Kamala Devi. The others remained unidentified. DNA analysis was hindered by insufficient samples. Police suspected many victims, mostly prostitutes, didn't inform their families about seeking Surojji's services, making it difficult to link disappearances to him. Following the discovery of 42 corpses, authorities urged local residents to report missing female family members. Approximately 80 families filed reports of missing relatives, suggesting Ahmed Surojji's victim count might exceed 42. Ahmed Surojji kept a diary documenting his crimes. Additionally, authorities suspected Surojji's 3 wives, Tumini, Tumina, and Natia, of involvement in his crimes. Tumini was tried as an accomplice, accused of helping to lure victims to their home, where Surojji would murder them. All 3 wives were arrested and charged. Ahmed Surojji's trial began in December of 1997. During his trial, he was held at the Medan District Court Detention Center. On December 11th, prosecutors sought the death penalty, but faced challenges due to unidentified victims and limited evidence. After 7 months of gathering evidence and lining up witnesses, the trial concluded. On April 27, 1998, Surojji was convicted of murdering 42 women. He and his wife Tumini were initially sentenced to death, but Tumini's sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. Public opinion strongly influenced the trial, with intense public outrage and demands for Surojji's execution. On July 10, 2008, Ahmed Surojji was sent to the firing squad, bringing closure to the case over a decade later. Ahmed Surojji's crimes serve as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist within humanity. Fueled by twisted beliefs in dark magic and supernatural powers, Surojji's heinous crimes, driven by a lust for power and control, claimed the lives of 42 innocent women who sought his guidance as a self-proclaimed sorcerer. Brought to justice through trialless investigations and prosecution, Surojji's execution in 2008 marked the end of a horrific chapter in Indonesian history, exposing the devastating consequences of blind faith and exploitation. This case highlights the importance of vigilant law enforcement, community awareness, and the protection of vulnerable individuals, particularly women, from those who prey on their fears and superstitions. May the memories of the victims never be forgotten, and may their stories serve as a warning against the dangers of manipulation, exploitation, and violence disguised as spiritual or mystical practices. Rest in peace, the victims. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories. I'm your host Safa, signing off with Crime Pod.